Welcome, crew, guys, gals, ghouls, friends, fiends, foes, whoever may be listening Beyond The Omniverse tonight. Secure your tinfoil hats, buckle down tight, and hold on loosely as we soar over the rocky tops of the La Platas on a rocky mountain high, get sucked into the vortex of the Four Corners, and settle down snugly at mile marker 420 in colorful Colorado. It is Sunday, January 12th, Monday, January 13th, for those of you across the pond and beyond. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to you, and thanks so much for joining us tonight on We Are Paradox Media's Late Night in the Rockies. I'm your host, TessaTNT, and we are broadcasting live from the Mile High Clubhouse tonight. We are no longer broadcasting live on Spreaker. I really hate it, and it took me a day to get my broadcast uploaded. So finally got yesterday's up today. But you can find us live on Facebook, YouTube, Twitch, and anywhere you listen to your podcasts. We're also live on KPNL Radio, which you can find at KPNL Radio at kpnl-db.com. So Sundays are generally story time, which it still is, but right before I hopped on here, I was watching YouTube as per usual, and there was this video that I came upon that I was like, man, I might have time for this, but then I had to go lock up the chicken coop and stuff really quick, and I don't know. I have said this before on the show. I like to fall asleep listening to like Be Buster or Let's Read or whatever. Like, I love horror podcasts, and people are like, that's so weird because, you know, it's scary stuff. But I don't know. I think it's the cadence of their voice and the calmness of their voice, and I just love horror. So I figured you guys might like this one too. So I'm going to play it really quick. It's only an 8-minute, a little over 8-minute thing. But yeah, I just thought it was super awesome, and honestly wanted to finish watching it. I only got like 2 minutes in, and I was like, I want to know more. But yeah, let's go ahead and get to it, shall we? Let's see who we got here. Bats for Brains. And go over here and subscribe. I like what he does so far, and like I said, I only saw 2 minutes, so I hope you guys enjoy it just as much as I have so far. And yeah, right here, 2 minutes basically. That's funny. 1 minute and 59 seconds. So yeah, I overdid it there. Let's go back to the beginning.
Picture this. You're lying in bed, lights out, bundled up in your favorite blankets, and instead of drifting off to the soothing sound of rain or some chill lo-fi beats, you're listening to a story about a guy finding teeth in his walls. And somehow, that's relaxing. If this is you, you're not alone. In fact, a growing number of people are finding comfort, yes, comfort, in the deep, dark void of horror podcasts. It's a phenomenon so strange it almost sounds like its own horror story. But why is this happening? Why are people turning to spooky tales of ghosts, cryptids, and serial killers to help them fall asleep? Well, grab your nightlight, because today we're diving into the psychology of comfort horror and why fear might be the most calming thing in your life. Let's start with the basics. Comfort horror isn't about watching slasher films on repeat or falling asleep to the Texas Chainsaw Massacre soundtrack, although, hey man, no judgment if you do. Comfort horror is more like a warm hug from a ghost. It's a kind of spooky that feels safe, cozy, and maybe just a little nostalgic. I'll get to that in a second. Podcasts like the No Sleep podcast or the Let's Read podcast or the Be Buster YouTube channel, and I know Buster probably has a podcast too, but I just find myself listening to his stuff on YouTube more often. They strike this perfect balance. They don't just scare you, they soothe you. But how? They do that by creating controlled environments where the horror is just real enough to keep your brain engaged, but distant enough to feel like it can't actually harm you. It's like the mental equivalent of riding a roller coaster. Your brain says, this is terrifying. But your body knows that you're strapped in, you're fine, this is okay. Unless you're me on a roller coaster, I mean, I don't actually ride them. I'm the guy that holds everybody's stuff while they go, because I'm not getting up there. Okay, let's get a little science-y. Why does fear feel good? Well, it turns out that it's all about control. When you consume horror media, whether it's a creepy podcast, a scary movie, or one of those clickbait articles about real-life hauntings, you're willingly putting yourself in a controlled state of fear. You little control freak. Your brain responds by releasing adrenaline and dopamine. The adrenaline says, hey, we're in danger here. But the dopamine goes, no, we're fine. Here's a reward for sticking around. The result? It's a rush of emotions that leave you feeling oddly satisfied. It's kind of like eating spicy food. I mean, you know it's going to hurt, but you know it's a good kind of hurt. Unless, of course, you take it too far and you end up summoning a demon through your taste buds, which is, to be honest, probably already a story in the No Sleep subreddit. So, when you're lying in bed, listening to some soothing narration about shadowy figures in the forest, your brain is enjoying this delicate cocktail of fear and calm. I mean, it's fear, but it's safe fear. Here's where things get even weirder. Horror isn't just tolerable, it actually helps people sleep better. For a lot of listeners, the stories act like as a bedtime ritual. The familiar voices, the repetitive structure, and the rhythmic pacing of the narration can be incredibly soothing. It's kind of like a creepy lullaby. I mean, you know how kids fall asleep to songs about spiders crawling up waterspouts. Same energy, just more blood splatter. This is where things, I think, get really interesting. I reached out to some of the biggest and most popular horror podcasts on the internet. You know, the heavy hitters who specialize in creeping us out on a regular basis. And I asked them if they knew that people were intentionally falling asleep to their shows. And the most common answer that I got was, up until just a few years ago, they had no idea. It wasn't until they started seeing comments and reviews from their listeners saying things like this on the Let's Read podcast. A reviewer says it's the perfect podcast to listen to as you're falling asleep because of his smooth, soothing voice. I also appreciate the length of each episode. Another review on the Booze and Booze podcast says, really nice and spooky, but also calming with the rain background. And I love to have it on while studying or falling asleep. And this one from the Derek Weber podcast, it says, snooze fest. It's boring, in my opinion, and that is my opinion. Okay, that's fine. That's fine. I feel okay. I only included that review in this video because that was a review left on my horror podcast, okay? Just being transparent. Some of the hosts even told me that they were completely surprised by this and even amused that their carefully crafted scares meant to send chills down your spine were instead lulling people into beautiful nightmares. It's the ultimate plot twist, creating terror so soothing that it becomes the perfect bedtime story. Another big reason that horror podcasts just hit the comfort zone is nostalgia. For a lot of people, horror taps into memories of staying up late watching Goosebumps or Are You Afraid of the Dark, or sneaking a peek at scary movies that you definitely were not allowed to watch. Even if the stories are new, the vibe is familiar. It's a throwback to the thrill of being scared as a kid, but knowing deep down that your parents were just down the hall. And then there's the narrators. Horror podcast hosts have some of the smoothest, most relaxing voices in the game. They could read a grocery list and still make it sound like the prelude to a ghost story. Here, watch this. Eggs, butter, and an unholy entity lurking in aisle 5. I mean, come on. How do you not fall asleep to that? One thing that horror fans know better than anyone is that fear brings people together. YouTube channels like Mr. Nightmare or Chilling Scares aren't just about the scares. They're about the shared experience. When you listen to these stories or these mysteries, you're part of a community that loves the same creepy, spine-chilling vibes that you do. And knowing that you are not alone in your love for the macabre is really comforting. Plus, let's be real. It's always fun to debate whether you'd survive a haunted house situation or not. Spoiler alert, I wouldn't. I mean, the second I hear a ghost whisper, "Get out," I'm already across state lines skedaddling. As I was getting the script together, I wanted to include a little section on humor, I wanted to highlight a couple of shows that did a good job of scaring us while also sprinkling in dark jokes at times or just ironic instances or something, but I just, at least off the top of my head, I couldn't think of any. I mean, I'm sure they're out there, I just couldn't come up with any. If you happen to know of any horror podcasts that are just the right balance of scary and funny, without being disrespectful to the source material, leave a comment below. You can do that on YouTube or on Spotify now. So, why do we find joy and comfort in horror podcasts? I think it's because they're the perfect blend of fear, nostalgia, and community. They let us confront our fears in a safe space, and they give us a chance to escape our own anxieties. And they remind us that, hey man, yeah, the world might be scary, but at least we're not alone. Horror podcasts are the unintentional champions of bedtime bliss. Who knew that tales of vengeful spirits and unspeakable eldritch horrors could be the white noise machine of our nightmares? If you like to fall asleep to horror podcasts, let me know in the comments which ones are your favorite. And if this is the first time you've ever heard of this and you're still on the fence about giving it a try, just remember, your other option to fall asleep is just doom scrolling on Twitter. Don't do that. Stay spooky, stay sleepy, and remember, if you hear whispering under your bed, it's probably just your cat. Or not. Good night.
Yes, probably not. I'm going to say no, not. Not the cat, because the cat is either on me or somewhere making noise. That was interesting. I really enjoyed that. Makes a lot of sense. And like I was saying, like the rhythm of their speaking and the calmness, coolness of their voice, etc., just lulls you to sleep. All right, so we are... What chapter are we on? Chapter 17, Section 4. And this is Stephen King's Insomnia. I usually have the banner up. I took it down for Bats for Brains thing there, but we'll put it back up. All right. They joined the bald doctors in the hallway outside Bob Polhurst's room. Through the open door, they could see the death watch continuing around the old teacher's bed. Lois. The man closest to the bed is Bill McGovern, a friend of ours. There's something wrong with him, something awful. If we do what you want, could you? But Lachesis and Clotho were shaking their heads in unison. Clotho, nothing can be changed. Yes, Ralph thought. Lawrence knew. Done bun can't be undone. Lois, when will it happen? Clotho, your friend belongs to the other, to the third, to the one Ralph has already named Atropos. But Atropos could tell you the exact hour of the man's death no more than we could. He can't even tell whom he will take next. Atropos is an agent of the random. This phrase sent a chill through Ralph's heart. Lachesis, but this is no place for us to talk, come. Lachesis took one of Clotho's hands, then held out his free hand to Ralph. At the same time, Clotho reached toward Lois. She hesitated, then looked at Ralph. Ralph, in his turn, looked grimly at Lachesis. You better not hurt her. Neither of you will be hurt, Ralph. Take my hand. I'm a stranger in paradise, Ralph's mind finished. Then he sighed through his teeth, nodded to Lois, and gripped Lachesis' outstretched hand. That shock of recognition, as deep and pleasant as an unexpected encounter with an old and valued friend, washed over him again. Apples and bark, memories of orchards he had walked through as a kid. He was somehow aware, without actually seeing it, that his aura had changed color and become, at least for a little while, the gold-flecked green of Clotho and Lachesis. Lois took Clotho's hand and held a sharp little gasp over her teeth, then smiled hesitantly. Clotho, complete the circle, Ralph and Lois. Don't be afraid, all is well. Boy, do I ever disagree with that, Ralph thought. but when Lois reached for his hand, he grasped her fingers. The taste of apples, the texture of dry bark, was joined by some dark and unknowable spice. Ralph inhaled its aroma deeply, then smiled at Lois. She smiled back, no hesitation in that smile, and Ralph felt a dim, far-off confusion. How could you be afraid? How could you even hesitate when what they brought felt this good and seemed this right? I sympathize, Ralph, but hesitate anyway, a voice counseled. Ralph? Ralph! She sounded alarmed and giddy at the same time. Ralph looked around just in time to see the top of the door of room 315 descending past her shoulders. Except it wasn't the door going down, it was Lois going up. All of them going up, still holding hands in a circle. Ralph had just gotten this through his head when momentary darkness, sharp as a knife edge, crossed his vision like a shadow thrown by the slat of a Venetian blind. He had a brief glimpse of narrow pipes that were probably part of the hospital's sprinkler system, surrounded by tufted pink pads of insulation. Then he was looking down at a long tiled corridor. The gurney cart was rolling straight at his head, which he suddenly realized had surfaced like a periscope in one of the fourth-floor corridors. He heard Lois cry out and felt her grip on his hand tighten. Ralph closed his eyes instinctively and waited for the approaching gurney to flatten his skull. Clotho, be calm, please be calm. Remember that these things exist on a different level of reality from the one we are, and you are, right now. Ralph opened his eyes. The gurney was gone, although he could hear its receding wheels. The sound was coming from behind him now, and the gurney, like McGovern's friend, had passed right through him. The four of them were now levitating slowly into the corridor, with what had to be the pediatrics wing. Fairy tale creatures pranced and gamboled up and down the walls, and characters from Disney's Aladdin and The Little Mermaid were decaled onto the windows of a large, brightly lighted play area. A doctor and a nurse strolled toward them, discussing a case. Further tests seemed to be indicated, but only if we could make it at least 90% sure that. The doctor walked through Ralph, and as he did, Ralph understood that he had started smoking again on the sly after 5 years off the weed, and was feeling guilty as hell about it. Then they were gone. Ralph looked down just in time to see his feet emerge from the tiled floor. He turned to Lois, smiling tentatively. It sure beats the elevator, doesn't it? She nodded. Her grip on his hand was still very tight. They rose through the 5th floor, surfaced in a doctor's lounge on the 6th floor. 2 doctors, the full-size kind, present, one watching an old F Troop rerun, and the other snoring on the hideous Swedish modern sofa. And then they were on the roof. The night was clear, moonless, gorgeous. Stars glittered across the arc of the sky in an extravagant, misty sprawl of light. I also forgot to do this. Yeah, I forgot after that video to go ahead and share this picture. This is the one I usually post when I do story time. There we go. The wind was blowing hard, and he thought of Mrs. Perrin saying Indian summer was over. He could mark her words. Ralph could hear the wind but not feel it. Although he had an idea he could feel it if he wanted to. It was just a matter of concentrating in the right way. Even as this thought came, he sensed some minor, momentary change in his body. Something that felt like a blink. Suddenly his hair was blowing back from his forehead, and he could hear his pants cuffs flapping around his shins. He shivered. Mrs. Perrin's back had been right about the weather changing. Ralph gave another interior blink, and the push of the wind was gone. He looked over at Lachesis. "Can I let go of your hand now?" Lachesis nodded and dropped his own grip. Clotho released Lois's hand. Ralph looked across town to the west and saw the pulsing blue runway lights of the airport. Beyond them was the gridwork of orange arc sodiums that marked Cape Green, one of the new housing developments on the far side of the Barrens. And someplace in the sprinkle of lights just east of the airport was Harris Avenue. "It's beautiful, isn't it, Ralph?" He nodded and thought that standing there and seeing the city spread out in the dark like this was worth everything he had been through since the insomnia had started. Everything and then some, but that wasn't a thought he entirely trusted. He turned to Lachesis and Clotho. "All right, explain. Who are you? Who is he? And what do you want us to do?" The two bald doctors were standing between two rapidly turning heat ventilators, which were spraying brownish-purple fans of affluent into the air. They glanced nervously at each other, and Lachesis gave Clotho an almost imperceptible nod. Clotho stepped forward, looking for Ralph and to Lois, and seemed to gather his thoughts. "Very well. First you must understand that the things which are happening, while unexpected and distressing, are not precisely unnatural. My colleague and I do what we were made to do. Atropus does what he was made to do, and you, my short-time friends, will do what you're meant to do." Ralph favored him with a bright, bitter smile. "There goes freedom of choice, I guess." Lachesis. "You mustn't think so. It's simply that what you call freedom of choice is part of what we call Ka, the great will of being." Lois. "We see as through a glass darkly? Is that what you mean?" Clotho, smiling his somehow youthful smile. "The Bible, I believe, in a very good way of putting it." Ralph. "Also pretty convenient for guys like you, but let's pass on that for now. We have a saying that isn't from the Bible, gentlemen, but it's a pretty good one just the same. Don't gild the lily. I hope you'll keep it in mind." Ralph had an idea, however, that might be a little too much to ask. Section 5. Clotho began to speak then, and he went on for a fair length of time. Ralph had no idea how long exactly, because time was different on this level, compressed somehow. At times there were no words at all in what he said. Verbal terms were replaced with simple bright images like those in a child's Rubik's puzzle. Ralph supposed this was telepathy, and thus pretty amazing, but while it was happening it felt as natural as breath. Sometimes both words and images were lost, interrupted by puzzling breaks in communication. Yet even then, Ralph was usually able to get some idea of what Clotho was trying to convey, and he had an idea Lois was understanding what was hidden in those lapses even more clearly than he himself. First, know that there are only 4 constants in that area of existence where your lives and ours, the lives of the overlap. These 4 constants are life, death, the purpose, and the random. All these words have meaning for you, but you now have a slightly different concept of life and death, do you not? Ralph and Lois nodded hesitantly. Lachesis and I aren't agents of death. This makes us figures of dread to most short-timers. Even those who pretend to accept us and our function are usually afraid. In pictures, we are sometimes shown as a fearsome skeleton or a hooded figure whose face cannot be seen. Clotho put his tiny hands on his white-clad shoulders and pretended to shudder. The burlesque was good enough to make Ralph grin. But we are not only agents of death, Ralph and Lois. We are also agents of the purpose. And now you must listen closely, for I would not be misunderstood. There are those of your kind who feel that everything happens by design, and there are those who feel all events are simply a matter of luck or chance. The truth is that life is both random and on purpose, although not in equal measure. Life is like... Here Clotho formed a circle with his arms, like a small child trying to shape the shape of the earth, and within it, Ralph saw a brilliant and evocative image. Thousands, or perhaps it was millions, of playing cards fanned out in a flickering rainbow of hearts and spades and clubs and diamonds. He also saw a great many jokers in this huge pack, but so many as to make up a suit of their own, but clearly a lot more, proportionally speaking, than the 2 or 3 found in the usual deck. Every one of them was grinning, and every one was wearing a battered Panama with a crescent bitten out of the rim. Everyone carried a rusty scalpel. Ralph looked at Clotho and widened his eyes. Clotho nodded. Yes, I don't know exactly what you saw, but I know you saw what I was trying to convey, Lois. What about you? Lois, who loved playing cards, nodded palely. Atropos is the Joker in the deck? That's what you mean? He's an agent of the random. We, Lachesis and I, serve that other force, the one which accounts for most events in both individual lives and lives' wider stream. On your level of the building, Ralph and Lois, every creature is a short-time creature and has an appointed span. This isn't to say that a child pops out of its mother's womb with a sign around its neck reading, "Cut cord at 84 years, 11 months, 9 days, 6 hours, 4 minutes, and 21 seconds. That idea is ridiculous. Yet time passages are usually set, and as both of you have seen, one of the many functions the short-time aura serves is as a cloak. Lois stirred, and as Ralph turned to look at her, he saw an amazing thing. The sky overhead was growing pale. He guessed it must be 5 in the morning. They had arrived at the hospital at around 9 in the morning on Tuesday evening. 9 o'clock on Tuesday evening, and now, all at once, it was Wednesday, October 6th. Ralph had heard of time flying, but this was ridiculous. Lois, your job is what we call natural death, isn't it? Her aura flickered with confused, incomplete images. A man, the late Mr. Chase, Ralph was quite sure, lying in an oxygen tent. Jimmy V opening his eyes to look at Ralph and Lois in the instant before Clotho cut his balloon string. The obituary page from the Dairy News, peppered with photographs, was not much bigger than a postage stamp of the weekly harvest from the local hospitals and nursing homes. Both Clotho and Lachesis shook their heads. Lachesis. There's no such thing as natural death, not really. Our job is purposeful death. We take the old and the sick, but we take others as well. Just yesterday, for instance, we took a young man of 28, a carpenter, 2 short-time weeks ago. He fell from a scaffold and fractured his skull. During those 2 weeks, his aura was... Ralph got a fractured image of a thunderstruck aura like the one which had surrounded the baby in the elevator. Clotho. At last the change came, the turning of the aura. We knew it would come, but not when it would come. When it did, we went to him and sent him on. Sent him on where? It was Lois who asked the question, broaching the touchy subject of the afterlife almost by accident. Ralph grabbed for his mental safety belt, almost hoping for one of those peculiar blanks, but when their overlapped answers came, they were perfectly clear. Clotho, to everywhere, Lachesis, to other worlds than these. Ralph felt a mixture of relief and disappointment. That sounds very poetic, but I think what it means, correct me if I'm wrong, is that the afterlife is as much a mystery to you guys as it is to us. Lachesis sounded a bit stiff. On another occasion, we might have time to discuss such things, but not now. As you have no doubt already noticed, time passes faster on this level of the building. Ralph looked around and saw the morning had already brightened considerably. Sorry? Clotho smiling. Not at all. We enjoy your questions and find them refreshing. Curiosity exists everywhere along life's continuum, but nowhere is it as abundant as here. But what you call the afterlife has no place in the 4 constants. Life and death, the random and the purpose, which concern us now. The approach of almost every death which serves the purpose takes the course with which we are very familiar. The auras of those who will die purposeful deaths turn gray as the time of finishing approaches. This gray deepens steadily to black. We are called when the aura, and we come exactly as you saw last night. We give release to those who suffer, peace to those in terror, rest to those who cannot find rest. Most purposeful deaths are expected, even welcomed, but not all. We are sometimes called to take men, women, and children who are in the best of health. Yet their auras turn suddenly and their time of finishing has come. Ralph remembered the young man in the sleeveless Celtic's jersey he'd seen bopping into the Red Apple yesterday afternoon. He had been the picture of health and vitality, except for the spectral oil slick surrounding him, that was. Ralph opened his mouth perhaps to mention this young man or to ask about his fate, then closed it again. The sun was directly overhead now, and a bizarre certainty suddenly came to him that he and Lois had become the subject of lecherous discussion in the secret city of the old Crocs. Anybody seen him? No. Think they ran off together? Eloped, maybe. No, not at their age, but they might be shacked up. I don't know if Ralphie's got any live rounds left in the old ammo dump, but she's always looked like a hot ticket to me. Yeah, walks like she knows what to do with it, don't she? The image of his oversized rust bucket waiting patiently behind one of the ivory-covered units of the dairy cabins while the springs boinged and sproinged salaciously inside came to Ralph, and he grinned. He couldn't help it. A moment later, the alarming idea that he might be broadcasting his thoughts on his aura came to him, and he slammed the door on the picture at once, yet wasn't Lois looking at him with a certain amused speculation. Ralph turned his attention hastily back to Clotho. Atropus serves the random. Not all deaths of the sort short-timers call senseless and unnecessary and tragic are his work, but most are. When a dozen old men and women die in a fired retiring hotel, the chances are good that Atropus has been there, taking souvenirs and cutting cords. When an infant dies in his crib for no apparent reason, the cause more often than not is Atropus and his rusty scalpel. When a dog, yes, even a dog, for the destinies of almost all living things in the short-time world fall among either the random or the purpose, is run over in the road because the driver of the car that hit him picked the wrong moment to glance at his watch. Lois, is that what happened to Rosalie? Clotho, Atropus is what happened to Rosalie. Ralph's friend Joe Weiser was only what we call fulfilling circumstance. Lachesis. And Atropus is almost what happened to your friend, the late Mr. McGovern. Lois looked the way Ralph felt, dismayed but not really surprised. It was now late afternoon, perhaps as many as 18 short-time hours had passed since they had last seen Bill, and Ralph had known the man's time was extremely short even last night. Lois, who had inadvertently put her hand inside him, probably knew it even better. Ralph, when did it happen? How long after we saw him? Lachesis. Not long, while he was leaving the hospital. I'm sorry for your loss and for giving you the news in such clumsy fashion. We speak to short-timers so infrequently that we forget how. I didn't mean to hurt you, Ralph and Lois. Lois told him it was all right, that she quite understood, but tears were trickling down her cheeks and Ralph felt them burning in his own eyes. The idea that Bill could be gone, that the little shithead in the dirty smock had gotten him, was hard to grasp. Was he to believe McGovern would never hoist that satiric, bristly eyebrow of his again? Never bitch about how cruddy it was to get old again? Impossible. He turned suddenly to Clotho. Show us. Clotho, surprised, almost dithered. I don't think, Ralph. Seeing is believing to us short-time schmoes. Didn't you guys ever hear that one? Lois spoke up unexpectedly. Yes, show us, but only enough so we can know it and accept it. Try not to make us feel any worse than we already do. Clotho and Lachesis looked at each other, then seemed to shrug without actually moving their narrow shoulders. Lachesis flickered first 2 fingers of his right hand upward, creating a blue-green peacock's fan of light. In that, Ralph saw a small, eerily perfect representation of the ICU corridor. A nurse pushing a pharmacy cart came into this arc and crossed it. At the far side of the viewing area, she actually seemed to curve for a moment before passing out of view. Lois delighted in spite of the circumstances. It's like watching a movie in a soap bubble. Now McGovern and Mr. Plum stepped out of Bob Holhurst's room. McGovern had put on an old Derry High-letter sweater, and his friend was zipping up a jacket. They were clearly giving up the death watch for another night. McGovern was walking slowly, lagging behind Mr. Plum. Ralph could see that his downstairs neighbor and sometime friend didn't look good at all. He felt Lois's hand slip onto his upper arm and grip hard. He put his hand over hers. Halfway to the elevator, McGovern stopped, braced himself against the wall with one hand, and lowered his head. He looked like a totally blown runner at the end of a marathon. For a moment, Mr. Plum went on walking. Ralph could see his mouth moving and thought, he doesn't know he's talking to thin air, not yet at least. Suddenly, Ralph didn't want to see any more. Inside the blue-green arc, McGovern put one hand to his chest, the other went to his throat and began to rub as if he were checking for wattles. Ralph couldn't tell for sure, but he thought his downstairs neighbor's eyes looked frightened. He remembered the grimace of hate on Doc Number 3's face when he realized a short-timer had presumed to step into his business with one of the local strays. What had he said? "I'll fuck you over, Shorts. I'll fuck you over big time, and I'll fuck your friends over. Do you get me?" A terrible idea, almost a certainty, dawned in Ralph's mind as he watched Bill McGovern crumple slowly to the floor. "Lois, make it go away. Please make it go away." She buried her face against Ralph's shoulder. Clotho and Lachesis exchanged uneasy looks, and Ralph realized he had already begun to revise his mental picture of them as omniscient and all-powerful. They might be supernatural creatures, but Dr. Joyce brothers they were not. He had an idea they weren't much shakes at predicting the future either. Guys with really efficient crystal balls probably wouldn't have a look like that in their entire repertoire. They're feeling their way along, just like the rest of us, Ralph thought, and he felt a certain reluctant sympathy for Mr. C and Mr. L. The blue-green arc of light floating in front of Lachesis, and the images trapped inside it suddenly disappeared. Clotho sounding defensive. "Please remember that it was your choice to see, Ralph and Lois. We did not show you that willingly." Ralph barely heard this. His terrible idea was still developing, like a photograph one does not wish to see but cannot turn away from. He was thinking of Bill's hat, Rosalie's faded blue bandana, and Lois's missing diamond earrings. "Well, fuck your friends over, Shorts. Do you get it? I hope so. I most certainly do." He looked from Clotho to Lachesis, his sympathy for them disappearing. What replaced it was a dull pulse of anger. Lachesis had said there was not any such thing as accidental death, and that it included Mr. McGovern. Ralph had no idea or doubt that Atropos had taken McGovern when he had for one simple reason. He'd wanted to hurt Ralph, to punish Ralph for messing into what had Dorrance called it long-time business. Old Dorrance suggested he not do that. A good policy, no doubt, but he, Ralph, had really had no choice, because these 2 bold half-pints had messed in with him. They had, in a very real sense, gotten Bill McGovern killed. Clotho and Lachesis saw his anger and took a step backward, although they seemed to do it without actually moving their feet, their faces becoming more uneasy than ever. "You 2 are the reason Bill McGovern's dead. That's the truth of it, isn't it?" "Clotho, please, if you'll just let us finish explaining." Lois was staring at Ralph, worried and scared. "Ralph, what's wrong? Why are you angry?" "Don't you get it? This little setup of theirs cost Bill McGovern his life. We're here because Atropos has either done something these guys don't like or is getting ready to. Lachesis, you're jumping to conclusions, Ralph. But there's one very basic problem. He knows we see him. Atropos knows we see him? Lois's eyes widen with terror and with understanding. Chapter 18. A small white hand fell on Ralph's shoulder and lay there like smoke. Please, if you'll only let us explain. He felt that change, that blink, happen in his body even before he was fully aware he had wilded. He could feel the wind again coming out of the dark like the blade of cold knife, and shivered. The touch of Clotho's hand was now no more than a phantom vibration, just below the surface of his skin. He could see all three of them, but now they were milky and faint. Now they were ghosts. I've stepped down, not all the way back down to where we started, but at least down to a level where they can have almost no physical contact with me. My aura, my balloon string, yes, I'm sure they could get at those things, but the physical part of me that lives my real life in the short-time world. No way, Jose. Lois's voice is distant as a faded echo. Ralph, what are you doing to your thoughts? He looked at the ghostly images of Clotho and Lachesis. Now they looked not just uneasy and slightly guilty, but downright scared. Their faces were distorted and hard to see, but their fear was nonetheless unmistakable. Clotho, his voice distant but audible. Come back, Ralph. Please come back. If I do, will you quit playing games and be straight with us? Lachesis fading, disappearing. Yes, yes. Ralph made that interior blink happen again. The three of them came back into focus. At the same time, color once more filled up the spaces of the world, and time resumed its former spirit and sprint. He observed the waning moon sliding down the far side of the sky like a dollop of glowing mercury. Lois threw her arms around his neck, and for a moment he wasn't sure if she was hugging him or trying to strangle him. Thank God, I thought you were going to leave me. Ralph kissed her, and for a moment his head was filled with a pleasant jumble of sensory input. The taste of fresh honey, a texture like combed wool, and the smell of apples. A thought flipped across his mind. What would it be like to make love up here? And he banished it at once. He needed to think and speak very carefully in the next few minutes, hours, days. And thinking about stuff like that would only make it that much harder. He turned to the little bald doctors and measured them with his eyes. I hope you mean it, because if you don't, I think we'd better call this horse race off right now and go our separate ways. Clotho and Lachesis didn't bother with the exchanged glance this time. They both nodded eagerly. Lachesis spoke, and he did so in a defensive tone of voice. These fellows, Ralph suspected, were a lot more pleasant to deal with than Atropos, but no more used to being questioned, to being put on their mettle, Ralph's mother would have said, than he was. Everything he told you was true, Ralph and Lois. We may have left out the possibility that Atropos has slightly greater understanding of the situation than we would really like, but... Ralph, what if we refuse to listen to any more of this nonsense? What if we just turn and walk away? Neither replied, but Ralph thought he was seeing a dismaying thing in their eyes. They knew that Atropos had Lois's earrings, and they knew he knew. The only one who didn't know, he hoped, was Lois herself. She was now tugging his arm. Don't do that, Ralph. Please don't. We need to hear them out. He turned back to them and made a curt motion for them to go on. Lachesis, under ordinary circumstances, we don't interfere with Atropos, nor he with us. We couldn't interfere with him even if we wanted to. The random and the purpose are like the red and black squares on a checkerboard. defining each other by contrast, but Atropus does want to interfere with the way things operate. Interfering is, in a very real sense, what he was made to do, and on rare occasions, the opportunity to do so in a really big way presents itself. Efforts to stop his meddling are rare. Clotho. The truth is actually a little stronger, Ralph and Lois. Never in our experience has an effort been made to check or bar him. Lachesis. And are made only if the situation into which he intends to meddle is a very delicate one, where many serious matters are balanced and counterbalanced. This is one of those situations. Atropus has severed a life cord he would have done well to leave alone. This will cause terrible problems on all levels, not to mention a serious imbalance between the random and the purpose, unless the situation is rectified. We cannot deal with what's happening. The situation has passed far beyond our skills. We can no longer see clearly, let alone act. Yet in this case, our inability to see hardly matters because, in the end, only short-timers can oppose the will of Atropus. That is why you two are here. Ralph, are you saying that Atropus cut the cord of someone who was supposed to die a natural death or purposeful death? Clotho. Not exactly. Some lives, very few, are no clear designation. When Atropus touches such lives, trouble is always likely. All bets are off, you say. Such designated lives are like. Clotho drew his hands apart, and an image, playing cards again, flashed between them. A row of 7 cards that were swiftly turned over, one after another, by an unseen hand. An ace, a deuce, a joker, a trey, a 7, a queen. The last card the invisible hand flipped over was blank. Clotho. Does this picture help? Ralph's brow furrowed. He didn't know if it did or not. Somewhere out there was a person who was neither a regular playing card nor a joker in the deck. Person who was perfectly blank, up for grabs by either side. Atropus had slashed this guy's metaphysical air goes, and now somebody or something had called a timeout. Lois, it's Ed you're talking about, isn't it? Ralph rolled around and stared at her sharply, but she was looking at Lachesis. Ed knew is the blank card? Lachesis was nodding. How did you know that, Lois? Who else could it be? She wasn't smiling at him precisely, but Ralph felt the sense of a smile. She turned back to Clotho and Lachesis. Okay, at last we're getting somewhere, so I'll flash the red light on this deal. I think it was you guys. I have an idea that, on this one at least, you two aren't much more than the hired help. Put their heads together for a moment and murmured. But Ralph saw a faint ochre tinge appear like a seam at the place where their gringled oars overlapped and knew he was right. At last the two of them faced Ralph and Lois again. Lachesis. Yes, that is basically the case. You have a way of putting things in perspective, Ralph. We haven't had a conversation like this in 1,000 years. Clotho, if ever. Lachesis, as plaintively as a child. We have been. Ralph, the whole truth? Lachesis, all right, the whole truth. Yes, it is Ed Debnew's card. And the cord that Atropus cut. We don't know this because we have seen it. We've passed beyond our ability to see clearly, as I said, because it is the only logical conclusion. Debnew is undesignated, neither of the random nor the purpose, that we do know. And his must have been some sort of master cord to have caused all this uproar and concern. The very fact that he has lived so long after his life cord was severed indicates his power and importance. When Atropus severed his cord, he set a terrible chain of events in motion. Lois shivered and stepped closer to Ralph. Lachesis. You called us hired help. You are more right than you know. We are in this case simply messengers. Our job is to make you and Lois aware of what has happened and what is expected of you. And that job is now almost done. as to who flashed the red light. We can't answer that question because we don't really know. I don't believe you. But he heard the lack of conviction in his own voice, if it was a voice. Clotho, don't be silly. Of course you do. Would you expect the directors of a large automobile company to invite a lowly worker up to the boardroom so they could explain the reasons behind all the company's policies, or perhaps give him the details on why they decided to close one plant and leave another one open? Lachesis. We're a little more highly placed than the men who work on automobile assembly lines, but we're still what you would call working Joes. Rough, no more, no less. Clotho. Be content with this beyond the short-time levels of existence and the long-time levels on which Lachesis, Octopus, and I exist. There are yet other levels. These are inhabited by creatures we could call all-timers, beings which are either eternal or so close to it as to make no difference. Short-timers and long-timers live in overlapping spheres of existence, on connected floors of the same building, if you like, ruled by the random and the purpose. Above these floors, inaccessible to us but very much a part of the same tower of existence, live other beings. Some of them are marvelous and wonderful, others are hideous beyond all ability to comprehend, let alone yours. These beings might be called the higher purpose and the higher random, or perhaps there is no random beyond a certain level. We suspect that may be the case, but we have no real way of telling. We do know that it is something from one of these higher levels that has interested itself in Ed, and that something else from up there made a counter move. The counter move is you, Ralph and Lois. Lois gave Ralph a dismayed look that he hardly noticed. The idea that something was moving them around like chess pieces in Fade Chapin's beloved Runway 3 classic, an idea that would have infuriated him under other circumstances, went right by him for the time being. He was remembering the night Ed had called him on the telephone. You're drifting into deep water, he said, and there are things swimming around in the undertow you can't even conceive of. Entities, in other words. Alright, so we're going to leave it there for just now and go to our first music break. On this music break, we have the lovely and talented Miss Mia Savage, and she's going to be singing Your Skeleton, On Your Reality, Lemurian Crypto, and Let Me Be Your Home. You guys don't go anywhere. We'll be right back after this music break.
That I could take it, no matter how I
Welcome back, and thanks so much for joining me tonight on We Are Paradox Media's Late Night in the Rockies. Unfortunately, we are having some Century Stink issues, so our Facebook, YouTube, and Twitch have been shut down. I'm going to try and troubleshoot for a second here, and then if it doesn't work, oh well. Let me try something really quick. I'll be right back. It was as I suspected. The boy is on the World of Tanks. I knew that's where it was. Dang it. So frustrating. All I ask is for 2 freaking nights of the week, and I can't even get that. What the crack, I say. What the crack? Let me try this once more. Sorry, my Spreaker peeps. Oh my gosh. Yeah, very frustrating. You know, I'm not big on grounding kids, but I can't listen to clear instructions for Pete's sake. Ooh. So what do you guys think of this Stephen King book so far? I think it's pretty dang good. Poor Mr. McGovern, I wasn't expecting that just yet. I knew something was going to happen, but not that quickly. Not that way. So the boy has been instructed to power down the World of Tanks and unplug his routing cord. I love this computer. It does so many things, but it does not have an Ethernet cable import, so that has been an issue. Oh my gosh. So frustrating. First I say, oh my gosh, Becky. My apologies, guys. This is just redonkulous. Try every route I can. Connected, but no internet. Like, how does that even make sense? Let's help you get connected. Yes, that worked for me last time. Thanks a lot, Mr. Bill. Mr. Bill! Oh, good Lord. I'm just gonna have to start blocking everybody. I pay this bill, this is my bill, and I'm sick and tired of being ignored when I ask for simple shit. Yeah, I would say disconnect because it's not freaking connected. Connect automatically. Let's go. Let's go, let's go, let's go. Oh, I thought it was doing something for a second. We're spindling, it's dindling. Nope, nope, nope. Come on, man. Oh my gosh. Alright, well, I don't know what else to do. But to continue on, the show must go on. How can you disconnect to something you're not even connected to? This is so weird. Seriously. Alright, so we left off with Stephen King's Insomnia. It's been pretty dang good. Oh, did I say that already? Yeah, I did. But what the heck do you do? Just grin and bear it. Grin and bear it. Yes, that's what you do. Grin and bear it. Still nothing. Not a damn thing. Not a damn thing. Hello? 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 Oh my gosh. Yep. He's fired. He's totally freaking fired. So fucking done. So fucking done.
Dad's on my computer and he's not shutting down the WordPress that I had on a different tab. But I'm trying to get him to shut it down.
Yeah, tell him to do it now, because I can't even get on here that I was on already. And I ask you guys this all the time.
Sorry.
Not on the weekends after certain hours.
I didn't notice the time wrong.
Yeah.
But, so, Dad's trying to make me get a shower when I already did it like day before yesterday, which I'm clean and everything. I'm trying not to, argue with him because Steve's right there next to him. He showed them something on the computer, just...
Yeah, tell him you took one Saturday night.
I did.
Okay, well... Tell him to turn that shit off, too. Fucking serious. I'm just gonna block everybody on the internet. Is what I'm gonna have to do, because nobody listens. Alrighty then. Beings too hideous to comprehend according to Mr. C, and Mr. C was a gentleman who dealt with death for a living. They haven't really noticed you yet, Ed, had told him that night, but if you keep fooling with me, they will. And you don't want that, believe me, you don't. Lois, how did you get us up to this level in the first place? It was the insomnia, wasn't it? But chases cautiously. Essentially, yes, we're able to make certain small changes in short-term auras. These adjustments caused a rather special form of insomnia that altered the way you dream and the way you perceive the waking world. Adjusting short-term auras is delicate, frightening work. Madness is always a danger. Clotho. At times you may have felt that you were going mad, but neither of you was ever even close. You're much tougher, both of you, than you give yourself credit for. These assholes actually think they're being comforting, Ralph marveled, and then pushed his anger away again. He simply had no time to be angry now. Later, maybe, he could make up for that. He hoped so. For now, he simply patted Lois's hand, then turned to Clotho and Lachesis again. Last summer, after he beat his wife up, Ed spoke to me of being he called the Crimson King. Does that mean anything to you, fellows? Clotho and Lachesis exchanged another look, one which Ralph at first mistook for solemnity. Clotho, Ralph, you must remember that Ed is insane, existing in the delusional state. Yeah, tell me about it. But we believe that his Crimson King does exist in one form or another, and that when Atropos cut his life cord at Dipnu fell directly under this being's influence. The two little bald doctors looked at each other again, and this time Ralph saw the shared expression for what it really was. Not solemnity, but terror. A new day dawned Thursday and was now brightening its way toward noon. Ralph couldn't tell for sure, but he thought the speed with which the hours were passing down there in the short time level was increasing. If they didn't wrap this thing up soon, Bill McGovern wouldn't be the only one of their friends they outlived. Clotho, Atropos knew that the higher purpose would send someone to try to change what he has set in motion, and now he knows who. But you must not allow yourself to be sidetracked by Atropos. You must remember that he is little more than a pawn on this board. It is not Atropos who really opposes you. He paused and looked doubtfully at his colleague. Lachesis nodded for him to go on, and he did so confidently enough, but Ralph felt his heart sink a little just the same. He was sure the two bold doctors had the best of intentions, but they were pretty clearly flying on instruments just the same. Clotho, you must not approach Atropos directly either. I cannot emphasize that enough. He has been surrounded by forces much greater than himself, forces that are malignant and powerful, forces that are conscious, and will stop at nothing to stop you. Yet we think that if you stay away from Atropos, you may be able to block the terrible thing which is about to happen, which is, in a very real sense, happened already. Ralph didn't much care for the unspoken assumption that he and Lois were going to do whatever it was these two happy geckos wanted, but this hadn't seemed like exactly the right time to say so. Lois, what is about to happen? What is it you want from us? Are we supposed to find Ed and talk him out of doing something bad? Clotho and Lachesis looked at her with identical expressions of shocked horror. Haven't you been listening to... You mustn't even think of... They stopped and Clotho mentioned Lachesis to go ahead. If you didn't hear us before, Lois, hear us now. Stay away from Ed Dipnu. Like Atropos, this unusual situation has temporarily invested him with a great power. To even go near him would be to risk a visit from the entity he thinks of as the Crimson King, and besides, he's no longer in Derry. The Chessies glanced out over the roof where lights were coming on in the dusk of Thursday evening, then looked back at Ralph and Lois again. He is left for... No words, but Ralph caught a clear sensory impression which was part of smell, oil-greased exhaust, sea salt, part feel and sound, the wind snapping at something, perhaps a flag, and part sight, a large rusty building with a huge door standing open on a still track. He's on the coast, isn't he? Or going there? Clotho and Lachesis nodded, and their faces suggested that the coast, 80 miles from Derry, was a very good place for Ed Dipnu. Lois tucked his hand again, and Ralph glanced at her. Did you see the building, Ralph? He nodded. Lois, it's not Hawking Labs, but it's near there. I think it might even be a place I know. Lachesis speaking rapidly as if to change the subject. Where he is, or what he might be planning, really doesn't matter. Your task lies elsewhere, in safer waters, but you still may need to use all of your considerable short-time powers to accomplish it. And there still may be a great danger. Lois looked nervously at Ralph. Tell them we won't hurt anybody, Ralph. We might agree to help them if we can, but we won't hurt anybody no matter what. Ralph, however, told them no such thing. He was thinking of how the diamond chips had glittered at Atropos's earlobes, and meditating on how perfectly he had been trapped, and Lois along with him, of course. Yes, he would hurt someone to get the earrings back. That wasn't even a question, but just how far would he go? Would he perhaps kill to get them back? Not wanting to tackle this issue, not wanting to even look at Lois, at least for the time being, Ralph turned back to Clotho and Lachesis. He opened his mouth to speak, but she got there first. There's one other thing I want to know before we go any further. It was Clotho who replied, sounding slightly amused, sounding, in fact, remarkably like Bill McGovern. Ralph didn't care for it much. What is that, Lois? Is Ralph in danger too? Does Atropus have something of Ralph's we need to take back later on? Something like Bill's hat? Lachesis and Clotho exchanged a quick and apprehensive glance. Ralph didn't think Lois caught it, but he did. She's getting too close for comfort, that look said. Then it was gone. Their faces were smooth again as they turned their attention back to Lois. Lachesis. No. Atropus has taken nothing from Ralph because up until now, doing so would not help him in any way. Ralph? What do you mean, up until now? Clotho. You've spent your life as part of the purpose, Ralph, but that has changed. When did it change? It happened when we started seeing the auras, didn't it? They looked at each other, then at Lois, then nervously at Ralph. They said nothing, and an interesting idea occurred to Ralph. Like the boy George Washington of the cherry tree myth, Clotho and Lachesis did not tell a lie. And at moments like this, they probably regretted it. The only alternative was the one they were employing, keeping their lips zipped and hoping the conversation would move on to safer areas. Ralph decided he didn't want to move on, at least not yet, even though they were dangerously close to allowing Lois to find out where her earrings had gone. Always assuming she didn't know that already, a possibility that did not strike him as at all remote. An old Carney Pitchman's line occurred to him. Step right up, gentlemen, but if you want to play, you have to pay. Oh no, Lois, the change didn't happen when I started to see the auras. I think a lot of people catch a glimpse into the long-time world of auras every now and then, and nothing had happened to them. I don't think I got knocked out of my nice, safe place in the purpose until we started to talk to these two fine fellows. I say, fine fellows, you did everything but leave a trail of breadcrumbs, even though you knew perfectly well what was going to happen. Isn't that about the size of it? They looked down at their feet, then slowly, reluctantly back up at Ralph. It was Lachesis who answered. Yes, Ralph, we drew you to us even though we knew it would alter your ka. It's unfortunate, but the situation demanded it. Now Lois will ask about herself, Ralph thought. Now she must ask. She didn't. She only looked at the two little bald doctors with an inscrutable expression completely unlike any of her usual or Lois looks. Ralph wondered again how much she knew or guessed, marveled again that he didn't have the slightest clue, and then these speculations were swallowed in a fresh wave of anger. Oh my gosh. You guys, man, oh man, you guys. He didn't finish, although he might have if Lois hadn't been standing beside him. You guys have done quite a bit more than just mess with our sleep, haven't you? I don't know about Lois, but I had a nice little niche in the purpose, which means that you deliberately made me an exception to the very rules you've spent your whole lives upholding. In a way, I've become as much a blank as this guy we're supposed to find, but how did Clotho put it? All bets are off? How very fucking true. Lois, you talked about using your powers. What powers? Lachesis turned to her, clearly delighted at the change of subject. The curiously oriental gesture. What appeared between them were two swift images. Ralph's hand producing a bolt of cold blue fire as it cut the air in a karate chop, and Lois's forefinger producing bright blue-gray pellets of light that looked like nuclear cough drops. Ralph, yes, all right, we have something, but it isn't reliable. It isn't like He concentrated and created an image of his own, hands opening the back of a radio and removing a pair of AA encrusted with blue-gray crud. Clotho and Lachesis frowned at him, not getting it. Lois, he's trying to say we can't always do that, and when we can, we can't do it for long. Our batteries go flat, you see. Understanding mixed with amused incredulity broke over their features. Ralph, what's so damn funny? Clotho, nothing, everything. You have no concept of how strange you and Lois seem to us, incredibly wise and perceptive at one moment, and incredibly naive at the next. Your batteries, as you call them, need never go flat, because the two of you are standing next to the bottomless reservoir of power. We assume that since you both already drunk from it, you must surely know about it. Ralph, what in the world are you talking about? Lachesis made it that curiously oriental hand opening gesture again. This time Ralph saw Mrs. Perrine walking stiffly upright with an aura the color of a West Pointer's dress uniform. Saw a shaft of gray brilliance, as thin and straight as the quill of a porcupine, poke out of this aura. This image was overlaid by one of a skinny woman encased in a smoggy brown aura. She was looking out a car window. A voice, Lois's, spoke. Oh, Mina, isn't that the dearest little house? A moment later there was a soft, indrawn whistle, and a narrow ray of the woman's aura poked out from behind her neck. This was followed by a third image, brief but strong. Ralph reaching through the slot in the bottom of the information booth and gripping the wrist of the woman, who brambly orange was her aura, except that all at once the aura around her left arm no longer was orange. All at once it was the faded turquoise he now thought of as Ralph Roberts blue. The image faded. Lachesis and Clotho stared at Ralph and Lois. They stood back, shocked. Lois. Oh no, we can't do that. It's like... Image. 2 men in striped prison suits, and a little black mask tiptoeing out of the bank vault carrying bulging sacks with the money symbol printed on the sides. Ralph. No, even worse. It's like... Image. A bat flies in through an open casement window, makes 2 sweeping circles in a silvery shaft of moonlight, then turns into Ralph Lugosi in the cape and old-fashioned tuxedo. He approaches a sleeping woman, not a young rosy virgin, but old Mrs. Perrine, in a sensible flannel nightgown, and bends over to suck her aura. Where the heck did it go? Uh-oh. Where's the sucking of the aura? I just saw it. When Ralph looked back at Clotho and Lachesis, both of them were shaking their heads vehemently. Lachesis. No, you couldn't be more wrong. Have you not wondered why you are short-timers, marking the spans of your lives in decades rather than in centuries? Your lives are short because you burn like bonfires. When you draw energy from your fellow short-timers, it's like... Image, a child at the seashore. When you draw energy from your fellows, a lovely little girl with golden ringlets, balanced on her shoulders, runs down the beach to where the waves break. In one hand, she carries a red plastic bucket. She kneels and fills it from the vast gray-blue Atlantic. Clotho, you are like that child, Ralph and Lois. Your fellow short-timers are like the sea. Do you understand now? Ralph, there's really that much of this oral energy in the human race? Lachesis. You still don't understand. That's how much there is. Lois broke in. Her voice was trembling, although whether it were fear or ecstasy, Ralph could not tell. That's how much there is in each one of us, Ralph. That's how much there is in every human being on the face of the earth. Ralph whistled softly and looked from Lachesis to Clotho. They were nodding confirmation. You're saying we can stock up on this energy from whoever happens to be handy? That it's safe for people we take it from? Clotho. Yes, you could no more hurt them than you could empty the Atlantic with a child's beach pill. Ralph hoped that was so because he had an idea that he and Lois had been unconsciously burrowing energy like mad. It was the only explanation he could think of for all the compliments he had been getting. People telling him that he looked great. People telling him that he must be over his insomnia. Had to be because he looked so rested and healthy. That he looked younger. Hell, he thought, I am younger. The moon had set again, and Ralph realized with a start that the sun would soon be coming up on Friday morning. It was high time they got back to the central issue of this discussion. Let's cut the chase here, fellows. Why have you gone to all this trouble? What is it we're supposed to stop? And then, before either one could reply, he was struck by a flash of insight too strong and bright to be questioned or denied. It's Susan Day, isn't it? He means to kill Susan Day, assassinate her. Clotho, yes, but Lachesis, but that isn't what matters. Ralph, come on, you guys. Don't you think the time has come to lay to rest the rest of your cards on the table? Yes, Ralph, that time has come. There had been little or no touching among them since they had formed the circle and risen through the intervening hospital floors to the roof. But now Lachesis put a gentle feather right arm around Ralph's shoulder, and Clotho took Lois by the arm. As a gentleman of a bygone age might have led a lady onto a dance floor. Scent of apples, taste of honey, texture of wool, but this time Ralph's delight and that mingled sensory input could not mask the deep disquiet he felt as Lachesis turned him to the left and then walked with him toward the edge of the flat hospital roof. Like many larger and more important cities, Derry seemed to have been built in the most geographical and suitable place the original settlers could find. The downtown area existed on the steep sides of a valley. The Kenduskeag River flowed sluggishly through the overgrown tangle of the barrens at this valley's lowest level. From their vantage point atop the hospital, Derry looked like a town whose heart had been pierced by a narrow green dagger, except in the darkness the dagger was black. One side of the valley was Old Cape, the site of a seedy post-war housing development and a glossy, flossy new mall. The other side contained most of what people meant when they talked about downtown. Derry's downtown centered around Up Mile Hill. Witcham Street took the most direct course up his hill, rising steeply before branching off into the tangle of trees. Harris Avenue was one of them. That made up the west side. Main Street diverged from Witcham halfway up the hill and headed southwest along the valley's shallower side. This area of town was known both as Main Street Hill and as Basie Park, and near the very top of Main Street's rise. Lois almost moaning, "Dear God, what is it?" Ralph tried to say something comforting and produced nothing but a feeble croak. Near the top of Main Street Hill, a huge black umbrella shape floated above the ground, blotting out stars which had begun to pale toward morning. Ralph tried to tell himself at first that it was only smoke, that one of the warehouses out that way had caught on fire. Perhaps even the abandoned railroad depot at the end of the Nebolt Street, but the warehouses were farther south. The old depot was farther west, and if that evil-looking toadstool had really been smoke, the prevailing wind would be driving it across the sky in plumes and banners. That wasn't happening. Instead of dissipating, the silent blotch in the sky simply hung there, darker than darkness. And no one sees it, Ralph thought. No one but me, and Lois, and the little bald doctors. The goddamn little bald doctors. He squinted to make out the shape within the giant death bag. Although he didn't really need to, he had lived in Derry most of his life, and could almost have navigated its streets with his eyes closed, as long as he did not have to do so behind the wheel of his car. Nevertheless, he could make out the building inside the death bag, especially now that daylight was beginning to seep over the horizon. The flat circular roof, which sat atop the curving glass and brick facade, was a dead giveaway. This throwback to the 1950s, designed very much tongue-in-cheek by the famous architect and one-time Derry resident, Benjamin Hanscom, was the new Derry Civic Center, a replacement for the one destroyed in the flood of '85. Clotho turned Ralph to look at him. You see, Ralph, you were right. He does mean to assassinate Susan Day, but not just Susan Day. He paused, glanced at Lois, then turned his grave face back to Ralph. That cloud, what you two quite correctly call a death bag, means that in a sense, he has already done what Atropos has set him on to do. There will be more than 2,000 people here tonight. And Ed Depew means to kill them all. If the course of events is not changed, he will kill them all. Jesse stepped forward to join his colleague. You, Ralph, and Lois are the only ones who can stop that from happening. So we're at section 3 of chapter 18, I believe it is, and we're going to go ahead and hop to our second music break. I'm sorry about the internet issues and stuff, but we're going to be listening to Miss Mia Savage, her band Antidote for Savages. You can check out on YouTube as well as Instagram. And she will be singing Bury Me in Heaven, Not a Phase, Singing to Your Grave, and The Bottom Line. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back after this music break.
thinks about it. Just a choice right now between fear and love. Right now, between fear and love.
Welcome back, and thanks so much for joining me tonight for We Are Paradox Media's Late Night in the Rockies. So tonight we have story time with me, TessaTNT, and that means we are reading Stephen King's Insomnia. I believe we're on chapter 18, section 3. Going to double check that real quick. Yes. Chapter 18, section 3. In his mind's eye, Ralph saw the poster of Susan Day, which had been propped in the empty storefront between the Rite Aid pharmacy and Daybreak's sundown. He remembered the words written in the dust on the outside of the window. Kill this cunt. And something like that might well happen in Derry. That was the thing. Derry was not precisely like other places. It seemed to Ralph that the city's atmosphere had improved a great deal since the big flood 8 years before. But it was still not precisely like other places. There was a mean streak in Derry, and when its residents got wrought up, they had been known to do some exceedingly ugly things. Come on. There we go. He wiped at his lips and was momentarily distracted by the silky distant feel of his hand on his mouth. He kept being reminded in different ways that his state of being had changed radically. Lois, horrified.
Is anything not for you anymore?
I'm not using Wi-Fi because I'm not allowed to use my own Wi-Fi.
What's happening?
I don't know, and I don't care. I'm trying to do my show, like the recording part of it, so can you please go and...
Sorry.
Yeah, thanks, Floyd. I love you.
Let me just...
How are we supposed to do it if we can't go near Atropos or Ed? How are we supposed to stop it from happening? Ralph realized he could see her face quite clearly now. The day was brightening with the speed of stop-motion photography in an old Disney nature film. "We'll phone in a bomb threat, Lois. That should work." Clover looked dismayed at this. Lachesis actually smacked his forehead with the heel of his hand before glancing nervously at the brightening sky. When he looked back at Ralph, his small face was full of something that might have been carefully muzzled panic. That won't work, Ralph. Now listen to me, both of you, and listen carefully. What you do in the next 14 hours or so, you must not underestimate the power of the forces Atropos unleashed when he first discovered Ed and then slashed his life cord. Ralph, why won't it work? Lachesis sounded both angry and frightened. We can't just go on and on answering your questions, Ralph. From here on, you're going to have to take things on trust. You know how fast time passes on this level. If we stay up here much longer, your chance to stop what is going to happen tonight at the Civic Center will be lost. You and Lois must step down again. You must. Clotho held up a hand to his colleague, then turned back to Ralph and Lois. I'll answer this one last time, although I'm sure that with a little thought you could answer it yourself. There have already been 23 bomb threats regarding Susan Day's speech tonight. The police have explosive sniffing dogs at the Civic Center. For the last 48 hours, they have been x-raying all packages and deliveries which have come into the building, and they have been conducting spot searches as well. They expected bomb threats, and they take them seriously, but their assumption in this case is that they are being made by pro-life advocates who are trying to keep Miss Day from speaking. Lois dully. Oh God, the little boy who cried wolf. Clotho. Correct, Lois. Ralph. Has he planted a bomb? He has, hasn't he? Bright light washed across the roof, stretching the shadows of the twirling heat ventilators like taffy. Clotho and Lachesis looked at these shadows and then to the east, where the sun's top arc had broken over the horizon with identical expressions of dismay. Lachesis. We don't know, and it doesn't matter. You must stop the speech from happening, and there is only one way to do that. You must convince the woman in charge to cancel Susan Day's appearance. Do you understand? She must not appear in the Civic Center tonight. You can't stop Ed, and you daren't try to approach Atropos, so you must stop Susan Day. Ralph. But it wasn't the strengthening sunlight that shut his mouth or the growing look of harried fear on the faces of the little bald doctors. It was Lois. She put a hand on his cheek and gave a small but decisive shake of the head. No more. We have to go down, Ralph, now. Questions were circling in his mind like mosquitoes. But if she said there was no more time, there was no more time. He glanced at the sun, saw it had entirely cleared the horizon, and nodded. He slipped his arm around her waist, Clotho anxiously. Do not fail us, Ralph and Lois. Ralph. Save the pep talk short stuff. This isn't a football game. Before either of them could reply, Ralph closed his eyes and concentrated on dropping back down to the short-time world. Chapter 19, Section 1. There was that sensation of blink, and a chill morning breeze struck his face. Ralph opened his eyes and looked at the woman beside him. For just a moment he could see her aura wisping away behind her like the gauzy overskirt of a lady's ball gown. And then it was just Lois, looking 20 years younger than she had the week before, and also looking extremely out of place, in her light full coat and good visiting, the sick dress, here on the tar and gravel hospital roof. Ralph hugged her tight as she began to shiver. Of Lachesis and Clotho there was no sign. Although they could be standing right beside us, Ralph thought, probably are, as a matter of fact. He suddenly thought of that old Carney Pitchman's line again, the one about how you had to pay if you wanted to play. So step right up, gentlemen, and lay your money down. But more often than not, you were played instead of playing. Played for what? A sucker, of course. And why did he have that feeling now? Because there were a lot of things you never found out, Carolyn said from inside his head. They led you down a lot of interesting sidetracks and kept you away from the main point until it was too late for you to ask the questions they might not have wanted to answer. And I don't think something like that happens by accident, do you? No, he didn't. That feeling of being pushed by invisible hands into some dark tunnel where anything might be waiting was stronger now. That sense of being manipulated. He felt small and vulnerable and pissed off. Well, we're back, Lois said through her briskly chattering teeth. What time is it, do you think? It felt like about 6 o'clock, but when Ralph glanced down at his watch, he wasn't surprised to see it had stopped. He couldn't remember when he had last wound it. Tuesday morning, probably? He followed Lois's gaze to the southwest and saw the Civic Center standing like an island in the middle of a parking lot ocean. The early morning sunlight kicked bright sheets of reflection from its curved banks of windows. It looked like an oversized version of the office building George Jetson worked in. The vast death bag which had surrounded it only moments before was gone. Oh, no, it's not. Don't kid yourself, buddy. You may not be able to see it right now, but it's there, all right. Early, he said, pulling her more tightly against him as the wind gusted, blowing his hair that now had almost as much black in it as white. Back from his forehead, but it's going to get late fast, I think. She took his meaning and nodded. Where are Lachesis on a level where the wind doesn't freeze your ass off, I imagine. Come on, let's find a door and get the hell off this roof. She stayed where she was a moment longer, though, shivering and looking across town. What has he done? She asked in a small voice. If he hasn't planted a bomb in there, what can he have done? Maybe he has planted a bomb, and the dogs with the educated noses just haven't found it yet. Or maybe it's something the dogs aren't trained to find. The canister stuck up in the rafters, say. A little something nasty had whipped up in the bathtub. Chemistry is what he did for a living, after all. At least until he gave up his job to become a full-time psycho. He could be planning to gas them like the rats. Oh, Jesus, Ralph. She put her hand to her chest just above the swell of her bosom and looked at him with wide, dismayed eyes. Come on, Lois, let's get off this damned roof. This time she came willingly enough. Ralph led her toward the roof door, which he fervently hoped they would find unlocked. 2,000 people, she almost moaned as they reached the door. Ralph was relieved when the knob turned under his hand, but Lois seized his wrist with chilly fingers before he could pull the door open. Her up-tilted face was full of frantic hope. Maybe those little men were lying, Ralph. Maybe they've got their own axe to grind, something we couldn't even hope to understand. And they were lying. I don't think they can lie, he said slowly. That's the hell of it, Lois. I don't think they can. And then there's that. He pointed at the Civic Center, at the dirty membrane they couldn't see, but which both knew was still there. Lois would not turn to look at it. She put her cold hand over his instead, pulled the roof door open, and started down the stairs. Section 2. Ralph opened the door at the top of the stairs, peeped into the 6th floor corridor, saw that it was empty, and drew Lois out of the stairwell. They headed for the elevators, then stopped together outside an open door with Doctor's Lounge printed on the wall beside it in bright red letters. Inside was the room they had seen on their way up to the roof with Clotho and Lachesis. Winslow Homer prints hanging crooked on the walls. The Silex standing on a hot plate. Hideous Swedish modern furniture. No one was in the room right now, but the TV bolted to the wall was playing nevertheless. And their old friend Lizette Benson was reading the morning news. Ralph remembered the day he and Lois and Bill had sat in Lois's living room, eating macaroni and cheese as they watched Lizette Benson report on the doll-throwing incident at Woman Care. Less than a month ago that had been. He suddenly remembered that Bill McGovern would never watch Lizette Benson again, or forget to lock the front door, and a sense of loss as fierce as a November gale swept through him. He could not completely believe it, at least not yet. How could Bill have died so quickly and so unceremoniously? He would have hated it, Ralph thought, and not just because he would have considered dying of a heart attack in a hospital corridor in bad taste. He would have considered it bad theater as well. But he had seen it happen, and Lois had actually felt it eating away at Bill's insides. That made Ralph think of the death bags surrounding the Civic Center and what was going to happen there if they didn't stop the speech. He started towards the elevator again, but Lois pulled him back. She was looking at the TV, fascinated. I feel a lot of relief when tonight's speech by feminist abortionist rights advocate Susan Day is history, Lizette Bennis was saying. But the police aren't the only ones who will feel that way, apparently. Both pro-life and pro-choice advocates are beginning to feel the strain of living on the edge of confrontation. John Kirkland is live at the Derry Civic Center this morning, and he has more. John? The pallid and smiling man standing next to Kirkland was Dan Dalton. The button on his shirt showed a scalpel descending toward an infant with its knees drawn up in the fetal position. This was surrounded by a red circle with a diagonal line slashed across it. Ralph could see half a dozen police cars and 2 new trucks, one with the NBC logo on its side, in the background of the shot. A uniformed cop strolled across the lawn leading 2 dogs, a bloodhound and a German shepherd on leashes. That's right, Lisette. I'm here at the Civic Center, where the mood could be termed one of worry and quiet determination. With me is Dan Dalton, president of the Friends of Life organization, which has been so vehemently opposed to Mrs. Day's speech. Mr. Dalton, would you agree with that assessment of the situation? That there's a lot of worry and determination in the air? Dalton asked. To Ralph, his smile looked both nervous and disdainful. Yes, I suppose you could put it that way. We are worried that Susan Day, one of this country's greatest unindicted criminals, will succeed in her efforts to confuse the central issue here in Derry, the murder of 12 to 14 helpless unborn children each and every day. But Mr. Dalton, and Dalton overrode him, we are determined to show a watching nation that we are not willing to be good Nazis, that we are not all cowed by the religion of political correctness. The dreaded PC. Mr. Dalton, we are also determined to show a watching nation that some of us are still capable of standing up for our beliefs, and to fulfill the sacred responsibility which a loving God has. Mr. Dalton, are the Friends of Life planning any sort of violent protests here? I shut him up for a moment and at least temporarily drained all the canned vitality from his face. With it gone, Ralph saw a dismaying thing. Underneath his bluster, Dalton was scared to death. Violence? He said at last. He brought the word out carefully, like something that could give his mouth a bad cut if mishandled. Good Lord, no. The Friends of Life reject the idea that 2 wrongs can ever make a right. We intend to mount a massive demonstration. We are being joined in this fight by pro-life advocates from Augusta, Portland, Portsmouth, and even Boston. But there will be no violence. What about Ed Dipnew? Can you speak for him? Dalton's lips, already thinned down to little more than a seam, now seemed to disappear altogether. Mr. Dipnew is no longer associated with the Friends of Life, he said. Ralph thought he detected both fear and anger in Dalton's voice. Neither are Frank Felton, Sandra McKay, and Charles Pickering, in case you intended to ask. John Kirkland's glance at the camera was brief but telling. It said that he thought Dan Dalton was as nutty as a bag of trail mix. Are you saying that Ed Dipnew and these other individuals, I'm sorry, I don't know who they are, have formed their own anti-abortion group, a kind of offshoot? We are not anti-abortion, we are pro-life, Dalton cried. There's a big difference, but you reporters seem to keep missing it. So you don't know Ed Dipnew's whereabouts or what, if anything, he might be planning. I don't know where he is, I don't care where he is, and I don't care about this. Shoots either. You're afraid, though, Ralph thought, and if a self-righteous little prick like you is afraid, I think I'm terrified. Dalton started off. Kirkland apparently decided he wasn't wrung completely dry yet, walked after him, shaking out his microphone cord as he went. But isn't it true, Mr. Dalton, that while he was a member of the Friends of Life, Ed Dipnew instigated several violence-oriented protests, including one last month where dolls soaked with artificial blood were thrown? You're all the same, aren't you? Dan Dalton asked. Pray for you, my friend. He stopped off. Kirkland looked after him for a moment, bemused, then turned back to the camera. We tried to get a hold of Mr. Dalton's opposite number, Gretchen Tilbury, who has taken on a formidable job of coordinating this event for Women Care. But she was unavailable for comment. We've heard that Miss Tilbury is at High Ridge, a women's shelter and halfway house which is owned and operated by Women Care. Presumably, she and her associates are out They're putting the finishing touches on plans for what they hope will be a safe, violence-free rally and speech at the Civic Center tonight. Ralph glanced at Lois and said, "Okay, now we know where we're going, at least." The TV picture switched to Lysette Benson in the studio. "John, are there any real signs of possible violence at the Civic Center?" Back to Kirkland, who returned to his original location in front of the cop cars. He was holding up a small white rectangle, which some printed on it in front of his tie. Well, private security police on duty here found hundreds of these file cards scattered on the Civic Center's front lawn this morning just after first light. One of the guards claims to have seen the vehicle they were dumped from. He says it was a Cadillac from the late 60s, either brown or black. He didn't get the license number, but says there was a sticker on the back bumper reading, "Abortion is murder, not choice." Back to the studio where Lysette Benson was looking mighty interested. "What's on those cards, John?" Back to Kirkland. "I guess you'd have to say it's sort of a riddle." He glanced down at the card. "If you have a gun loaded with only 2 bullets and you're in a room with Hitler and Stalin and an abortionist, what do you do?" Kirkland looked back into the camera and said, "The answer printed on the other side," Lysette, "is shoot the abortionist twice." This is John Kirkland reporting live from the Derry Civic Center. Section 3. "I'm starving," Lois said as Ralph carefully guided the Oldsmobile down the series of parking garage ramps, which would presumably set them free. If Ralph didn't miss any of the exit signs, that was. And if I'm exaggerating, I'm not doing it by much. "Me too," Ralph said, "and considering that we haven't eaten since Tuesday, I guess that's to be expected. We'll grab a good sit-down breakfast on the way out to High Ridge." "Do we have time?" "We'll make time. After all, any army fights on its stomach." "I suppose so, although I don't feel very army-ish. Do you know where?" "Hush a second, Lois." He stopped the Oldsmobile short, put the gear shift lever in park, and listened. There was a clacking sound from under the hood that he didn't like very much. Of course, the concrete walls of places like this tended to magnify sounds, but still. "Ralph," she asked nervously, "don't tell me something's wrong with the car. Just don't tell me that, okay?" "I think it's fine," he said, and began creeping toward daylight again. "I've just kind of fallen out of touch with old Nellie here since Carol died. Forgotten what kinds of sounds she makes." "You were going to ask me something, weren't you?" "If you know where that shelter is, High Ridge?" Ralph shook his head. "Somewhere out near the Newport town line is all I know. I don't think they're supposed to tell men where it is. I was kind of hoping you might have heard." Lois shook her head. "I never had to use a place like that, thank God. We'll have to call her, the Tilbury woman. You've met her with Helen, so can you talk to her? She'll listen to you." She gave him a brief glance, one that warmed his heart. "Anyone with any sense would listen to you, Ralph," it said. But Ralph shook his head. "I bet the only calls she's taking today are ones that come from the Civic Center, or from wherever Susan Day is." He shot her a glance. "You know, that woman's got a lot of guts coming here. Either that or she's donkey dumb. Probably a little of both. If Gretchen Tilbury won't take a call, how will we get in touch with her?" "Well, I'll tell you what. I was a salesman for a lot of what Faye Chapin would call my real life, and I bet I can still be inventive when I need to be." He thought of the information lady with the orange aura and grinned. Persuasive, too, maybe. "Ralph?" Her voice was small. "What, Lois?" "This feels like real life to me." He patted her hand. "I know what you mean." Section 4. A familiar skinny face poked out of the pay booth of the hospital parking garage. A familiar grin, one from which at least half a dozen teeth had gone AWOL, brightened it. "Hey, Ralph, that you? God damn if it ain't. Beauty. "Trigger?" Ralph asked slowly. "Trigger Vacon?" "None other." Trigger flipped his lank brown hair out of his eyes so he could get back a better look at Lois. Who's this Marigold here? Know her from somewhere, goddamn if I don't. Lois Chase, Ralph said, taking his parking ticket from its place over the sun visor. You might have known her husband, Paul. Goddamn right I did, Trigger cried. We was weekend warriors together back in 1970, maybe 71. Closed down Nan's Tavern more than once. My suds and body, how is Paul these days, ma'am? Mr. Chase passed on a little over 2 years ago, Lois said. Oh, damn, I'm sorry to hear that. He was a champ of a guy, Paul Chase. Just an all-around champ of a guy. Everybody liked him. Trigger looked as distressed as he might have done if she had told him that it happened only that morning. Thank you, Mr. Bacon. Lois glanced at her watch, then looked up at Ralph. Her stomach rumbled, as if to add one final point to the argument. Ralph handed his parking ticket through the open window of the car, and as Trigger took it, Ralph suddenly realized this stamp would show that he and Lois had been here since Tuesday night, almost 60 hours. What happened to the dry cleaning business, Trig? He asked hastily. They laid me off, Trigger said. Didn't I tell you? Laid almost everybody off. I was downhearted at first, but I caught on here last April, and I like this all kinds of better. I got my little TV for when it's slow, and there ain't nobody beeping their horns at me if I don't go first, second, traffic light turns green. We're cutting me off out there on extension. Everyone in a hurry to get to the next place, they are. Just why I don't know. Also, I tell you what, Ralph, that damn van is colder than witch's tit in the winter. Pardon me, ma'am. Lois did not reply. She seemed to be studying the backs of her hands with great interest. Ralph, meanwhile, watched with relief as Trigger crumpled up the parking ticket and tossed it into his wastebasket, without so much as a glance at the time and date stamp. He punched one of the buttons on his cash register, and 0.00 popped up on the screen in the booth's window. Geez, Trig, that's really nice of you, Ralph said. Hey, don't mention it, Trigger said, and grandly punched another button. This one raised the barrier in front of the booth. Good to see you. Say, you remember that time out there by the airport? Gosh, harder than hell it was, and those two fella almost got in a punch-up. Then it rained like a bugger. Felt some, too. Here's a walking, and I give you a ride home. Only seen you once or twice since then. He took a closer look at Ralph. You look a hell of a lot better today than you did then, Ralphie. I'll tell you that. Hell, you don't look a day over 55. Beauty. Beside him, Lois's stomach rumbled again, louder this time. She began studying the backs of her hands. I felt a lot older than that, though, Ralph said. Listen, Trig, it was good to see you, but we ought to... Damn, Trigger said, and his eyes had got distant. I had something to tell you, Ralph. At least I think I did. About that day, gosh, ain't I got a dumb old head? Ralph waited a moment longer, uncomfortably poised between impatience and curiosity. Well, don't feel bad about it, Trig. That was a long time ago. What the hell? Trigger asked himself. He gazed up at the ceiling of his little booth, as if the answer might be written there. Ralph, we ought to go, Lois said. It's not just wanting breakfast, either. Yes, you're right. He got the Oldsmobile rolling slowly again. If you think of it, Trig, give me a call. I'm in the book. It was good to see you. Trig Vacone ignored this completely. He no longer seemed aware of Ralph at all, in fact. Was it something we saw? He inquired of the ceiling. Or something we did? Gosh. He was still looking up there and scratching the frizz of hair on the nape of his neck when Ralph turned left and with a final wave guided his Oldsmobile down Hospital Drive toward the low brick building which housed Woman Care. Now that the sun was up, there was only a single security guard and no demonstrators at all. Their absence made Ralph remember all the jungle epics he'd seen as a young man, especially the part where the native drums would stop and the hero, John Hall or Frank Buck, would turn to his head bearer and say he didn't like it. It was too quiet. The guard took a clipboard from under his arm, squinted at Ralph's bowls, and wrote something down. The plate number, Ralph supposed, then he came ambling toward them along the leaf-strewn walk. At this hour of the morning, Ralph had his pick of the 10-minute spaces across from the building. He parked, got out, then came around to open Lois's door. as he had been trained. "How do you want to handle this?" she asked as he took her hand and helped her out. "Well, we'll probably have to be a little cute, but let's not get carried away, right?" "Right." She ran a nervous patting hand down the front of her coat as they crossed, then flashed a megawatt smile at the security guard. "Good morning, officer." "Morning." He glanced at his watch. "I don't think there's anyone in there just yet. Woman." "The receptionist is who we want to see," Lois said cheerfully. It was news to Ralph. "Barbie Richards, her Aunt Simone, has a message for her to pass along. Very important. Just say it's Lois Chase." The security guard thought this over, then nodded toward the door. "That won't be necessary. You go right ahead, ma'am," Lois said, smiling more brilliantly than ever. "We won't be two shakes, will we, Norton?" "Shake and a half, more like it," Ralph agreed. As they approached the building and left the security man behind, he leaned toward her and murmured, "Norton? Good God, Lois, Norton." "It was the first name that had come into my head," she replied. "I guess I was thinking of the honeymooners, Ralph and Norton, remember?" "Yes," he said. One of these days, Alice, pal, right to the moon." Two of the three doors were locked, but the one on the far left opened, and they went in. Ralph squeezed Lois's hand and felt her answering squeeze. He sensed a strong focusing of his concentration at the same moment, a narrowing and brightening of will and awareness. All around him, the eye of the world seemed to first blink and then open wide, all around them both. The reception area was almost ostentatiously plain. The posters on the walls were mostly the sort of foreign tourist agencies send out for the price of postage. The only exception was the right of the reception's desk, a large black and white photo of a young woman in a maternity smock. She was sitting on a bar stool with a martini glass in one hand. "When you're pregnant, you never drink alone." The copy beneath the photo read. There was no indication that in a room or rooms behind this pleasant, unremarkable business space, abortions were done on demand. Well, Ralph thought, what did you expect? An advertisement? A poster of aborted fetuses and a galvanized garbage pail between the one showing the Isle of Capri and the one of the Italian Alps? Get real, Ralph. To their left, a heavy-set woman in her late 40s or early 50s was washing the top of a glass coffee table. There was a little cart filled with various cleaning implements parked beside her. She was buried in a dark blue aura speckled with unhealthy-looking black dots which swarmed like queer insects over the places where her heart and lungs were, and she was looking at the newcomers with undisguised suspicion. Straight ahead, another woman was watching them carefully, although without the janitor's suspicion. Ralph recognized her from the TV news report on the day of the doll-throwing incident. Simone Castangoy's niece was dark-haired, about 35 and close to gorgeous, even at this hour of the morning. She sat behind a severe gray metal desk that perfectly complemented her looks, and with a forest-green aura which looked much healthier than the cleaning woman's. A cut glass vase filled with fall flowers stood in one corner of her desk. She smiled tentatively at them, showing no immediate recognition of Lois, then wiggled the tip of one finger at the clock on the wall. "We don't open until 8, she said, "and I don't think we could help you today in any case. The doctors are all off. I mean, Hamilton is technically covering, but I'm not even sure I could get to her. There's a lot going on. This is a big day for us." "I know," Lois said, and gave Ralph's hand another squeeze before letting it go. He heard her voice in his mind for a moment, very faint, like a bad overseas telephone conversation, but audible. "Stay where you are, Ralph. She's got..." Lois sent him a picture, which was even fainter than the thought, and gone almost as soon as Ralph glimpsed it. This sort of communication was a lot easier on upper levels, but what he got was enough. The hand with which Barbara Richard had pointed at the clock was now resting easily on top of the desk, but the other was underneath it, where a small white button was mounted on one side of the knee-hole. If either of them showed the slightest sign of odd behavior, she would push the button, summoning first their friend with the clipboard, who was posted outside, and then most of the private security cops in Derry. And I'm the one she's watching most carefully because I'm the man, Ralph thought. As Lois approached the reception desk, Ralph had an unsettling thought. Given the current atmosphere in Derry, that sort of sex discrimination, unconscious but very real, could get this pretty black-haired woman hurt, maybe even killed. He remembered Lydecker telling him that one of Ed's small cater of co-crazies was a woman. Pasty complexion, he'd said, lots of acne, glasses so thick they make her eyes look like poached eggs. Sandra Something her name was, and if Sandra Something had approached Miss Richards' desk, as Lois was approaching it now, first opening her purse and then reaching into it, would the woman, dressed in the forest green aura, have pushed the hidden alarm button? You probably don't remember me, Barbara, Lois was saying, because I haven't seen you much since you were in college, when you were going with that Sparkmeyer boy. Oh my God, Winnie Sparkmeyer? I haven't thought of him in years, Barbara Richards said, and gave an embarrassed little laugh. But I remember you, Lois Delancey, Aunt Simone's poker buddy. Do you guys still play? It's Chase, not Delancey, and we still do. Lois sounded delighted that Barbara had remembered her, and Ralph hoped that she wouldn't lose track of what they were supposed to be doing here. He needn't have worried anyway. Anyway, Simone sent me with a message for Gretchen Tilbury. She brought a piece of paper out of her purse. I wonder if you could give it to her? I doubt very much if I'll even talk to Gretchen on the phone today, Richard said. She's as busy as the rest of us. Busier. I'll bet. Lois tinkled an amazingly genuine little laugh. I guess there's no real hurry about this, though. Gretchen has got a niece who's been granted a full scholarship at the University of New Hampshire. Have you ever noticed how much harder people try to get in touch when it's bad news they have to pass on? Strange, isn't it? I suppose so, Richard said, reaching for the folded slip of paper. Anyway, I'll be happy to put this on Gretchen's. Lois seized her wrist, and a flash of gray light, so bright Ralph had to squint his eyes against it to keep from being dazzled, leaped up the woman's arm, shoulder, and neck. It spun around her head in a brief halo, then disappeared. No, it didn't, Ralph thought. It didn't disappear, it sank in. What was that? The cleaning woman asked suspiciously. What was that bang? The car backfired, Ralph said. That's all. Huh, she said. Gosh darn men think they know everything. Did you hear that, Barbie? Yes, Richard said. She sounded entirely normal to Ralph, and he knew that the cleaning woman would not be able to see the pearl gray mist which had now filled her eyes. I think he's right, but would you check with Peter outside? We can't be too careful. You gosh darn bet, the cleaning woman said. She set her Windex bottle down, crossed the doors, sparing Ralph a final dark look which said, You're old, but I just gosh darn bet you still have a penis down there somewhere, and went out. As soon as she was gone, Lois leaned over the desk. Barbara, my friend, and I have to talk to Gretchen this morning, she said, face to face. She's not here. She's at High Ridge. Tell us how to get there. Richard's gaze drifted to Ralph. He found her gray, pupilless eye sockets profoundly unsettling. It was like looking at a piece of classic statuary, which had somehow come to life. Her dark green aura had paled considerably as well. No, he thought, it's been temporarily overlaid by Lois's gray, that's all. Lois glanced briefly around, followed Barbara Richards' gaze to Ralph, then turned back to her again. Yes, he's a man, but this time it's okay. I promise you that. Neither one of us means any harm to Gretchen Tilbury or any of the women at High Ridge, but we have to talk to her. So tell us how to get there. She touched Richard's hand again, and more gray flashed up Richard's arm. Don't hurt her, Ralph said. I won't, but she's going to talk. She bent closer to Richards. Where is it? Come on, Barbara. You take Route 33 out of Derry, she said. The old Newport Road. After you've gone about 10 miles, there'll be a big red farmhouse on your left. There are 2 barns behind it. You take your first left after that. Cleaning woman came back in. Peter didn't hear. She stopped abruptly, perhaps not liking the way Lois was bent over her friend's desk, perhaps not liking the blank look in her friend's eyes. Barbara, are you right? Be quiet, Ralph said in a low, friendly voice. They're talking. He took the cleaning woman's arm just above the elbow, feeling a brief but powerful pulse of energy as he did so. For a moment, all the colors in the world brightened further. The cleaning lady's name was Rachel Anderson. She'd been married once to a man who'd beat her hard and often until he disappeared 8 years ago. Now she had a dog and her friends at Women Care, and that was enough. "Oh, sure," Rachel Anderson said in a dreamy, thoughtful voice. "They're talking, and Peter says everything's okay, so I guess I better just be quiet." "What a good idea," Ralph said, still holding her upper arm lightly. Lois took a quick look around to confirm. Ralph had the situation under control, then turned back to Barbara Richards once again. "Take a left after the red farmhouse with the 2 barns. Okay, I've got that. What then?" "You'll be on a dirt road. It goes up a long hill, about 1.5 miles, and then ends at a white farmhouse. That's High Ridge. It's got the most lovely view." "I'll bet," Lois said. "It was great to see you again." "Now, my friend and I." "Great to see you too, Lois," Richard said in a distant, uninterested voice. "Now my friend and I are going to leave. Everything is all right." "Good." "You won't need to remember any of this," Lois said. "Absolutely not." Lois started to turn away, then turned back and plucked up the piece of paper she had taken from her purse. It had fallen to the desk when Lois grabbed the woman's wrist. "Why don't you go back to work, Rachel?" Ralph asked the cleaning lady. He let go of her arm carefully, ready to grab it again at once if she showed signs of needing reinforcement. "Yes, I better go back to work," she said, sounding much more friendly. "I want to be done here by noon so I can go out to High Ridge and help make signs." Lois joined Ralph as Rachel Anderson drifted back to her cart of cleaning supplies. Lois looked both amazed and a little shaky. "They'll be okay, won't they, Ralph?" "Yes, I'm sure they will be. Are you all right? I'm not going to faint or anything like that." "I'm okay. Can you remember the directions?" "Of course. She's talking about the place that used to be Barrett's Orchards. Carolyn and I used to go out there every fall to pick apples and buy cider until they sold out in the early 80s. To think that's High Ridge." "2 days later, Ralph. I really am starving to death." "All right. What was the note, by the way? The note about the niece with the full scholarship at UNH?" She flashed him a little smile and handed it to him. It was her light bill for the month of September. Section 6. "Were you able to leave your message?" the security guard asked as they came out and started down the walk. "Yes, thanks," Lois said, turning on the megawatt smile again. She kept moving, though her hand was gripping Ralph's very tightly. He knew how she felt. He hadn't the slightest idea how long the suggestions they had given the 2 women would hold. "Good," the guard said, following them to the end of the walk. "This is going to be a long, long day. I'll be glad when it's over. You know how many security people we're going to have here from noon until midnight? A dozen, and that's just here. They're going to have over 40 at the Civic Center. That's in addition to the local cops. And it won't do a damn bit of good," Ralph thought. "And what for? So one blonde with an attitude can run her mouth?" He looked at Lois as if he expected her to accuse him of being a male sexist oinker, but Lois only renewed her smile. "I hope everything goes well for you, officer," Ralph said, and then led Lois back across the street to the Oldsmobile. He started it up and turned laboriously around in the Women Care driveway, expecting either Barbara Richards, Rachel Anderson, or maybe both of them to come rushing out through the front door, eyes wild and fingers pointed. He finally got the Olds headed in the right direction and let out a long sigh of relief. Lois looked over at him and nodded in sympathy. "I thought I was the salesman," Ralph said, "but man, I've never seen a selling job like that." Lois smiled demurely and clasped her hands in her lap. They were approaching the hospital parking garage when Trigger came rushing out of his little booth, waving his arms. Lois' first thought was that they weren't going to make a clean getaway after all. A security guard with a clipboard had tipped to something suspicious and phoned or radioed Trigger to stop them. Then he saw the look, out of breath but happy, and what Trigger had in his hand was a very old and very battered black wallet. It flapped open and closed like a toothless mouth, which with each wave of his right arm. "Don't worry, Ralph," said slowly, slowing the Olds down. "I don't know what he wants, but I'm pretty sure it's not trouble, at least not yet." I don't care what he wants. All I want is to get out of here and eat some food. If he starts to show you his fishing pictures, Ralph, I'll step on the gas pedal myself. Amen, Ralph said, knowing perfectly well that it wasn't fishing pictures Trigger the Con had in mind. He still wasn't clear on everything, but one thing he knew for sure. Nothing was happening by chance, not anymore. This was the purpose with a vengeance. He pulled up beside Trigger and pushed the button that lowered his window. It went down with an ill-tempted whine. Hey, Ralph, Trigger cried. I thought I missed you. What is it, Trig? We're in kind of a hurry. Yeah, this won't take but a second. I got it right here in my wallet, Ralph. Man, I keep all my paperwork in here and I never lose a thing out of it. He spread the old billfold's limp jaws, revealing a few crumpled bills, a celluloid accordion of pictures, and damned if Ralph didn't catch a glimpse of Trigger holding up a big bass in one of them, and what looked like at least 40 business cards, most of them creased and limber with age. Trigger began to go through these with the speed of a veteran bank teller counting currency. I never throw these things out, me, Trigger said. They're great to write stuff on, better in a notebook than free. Now just a second. Oh, you damn ting, where you be? Lois gave Ralph an impatient, worried look and pointed up the road. Ralph ignored both the look and the gesture. He had begun to feel a strange tingling in his chest. In his mind's eye, he saw himself reaching out with his index finger and drawing something in the foggy condensation that had appeared on the windshield of Trigger's van as a result of the summer storm 15 months ago. Cold rain on a hot day. Ralph, you remember the scarf Tip New was wearing that day? White with some kind of red marks on it? Yes, I remember, Ralph said. Cunt liquor, Ed had told the heavy-set guy. Fucked your mother and licked a cunt. And yes, he remembered the scarf, of course he did. But the red thing hadn't been just marks or a splotch or a meaningless bit of pattern. It had been an ideogram of ideograms. The sudden sinking in the pit of his stomach told Ralph that Trigger could quit rummaging through his old business cards right now. He knew what this was about. He knew. Was you in the war, Ralph? Trigger asked. The big one? Number 2? Anyway, I guess, Ralph said. I thought most of it in Texas. I went overseas in early 45, but I was rear echelon all the way. Trigger nodded. That means Europe, he said. Was no rear echelon in the Pacific, not by the end. England, Ralph said, then Germany. Trigger was still nodding, pleased. If you'd been in the Pacific, you would have known the stuff on that scarf wasn't Chinese. It was Japanese, wasn't it? Wasn't it, Trig? Trigger nodded. In one hand, he held a business card plucked from among many. On the blank side, Ralph saw a rough approximation of the doubled symbol that they seen on Ed's scarf. The double symbol he himself had drawn in the windshield mist. What are you talking about? Lois asked, now sounding not impatient but just plain scared. I should have known, Ralph heard him say in a faint, horrified voice. I still should have known. Known what? She grabbed his shoulder and shook it. Known what? He didn't answer. Feeling like a man in a dream, he reached out and took the card. Trigger the Con was no longer smiling, and his dark eyes studied Ralph's face with grave consideration. I copied it before it could melt off of the windshield, Trigger said, because I knew I seen it before, and by the time I got home that night, I knew where my big brother Marshall fought the last year of the war in the Pacific. One of the things he brought back was a scarf with that same 2 marks on it in that same red. I asked him just to be sure, and he wrote it on that card. Trigger pointed to the card Ralph was holding between his fingers. I meant to tell you as soon as I saw you again, only I forgot until today. I was glad I finally remembered, but looking at you now, I guess it would have been better if I stayed forgetful. No, it's okay. Lois took the card from him. What is it? What does it mean? Tell you later. Ralph reached for the gear shift. His heart felt like a stone in his chest. Lois was looking at the symbols on the blank side of the card, allowing Ralph to see the printed side. R.H. Foster Wells and Drywalls, it said. Below this, Trigger's big brother had printed a single word in black capital letters. Kamikaze. Oh, wow. There's a picture here, And it looks like it's the height. Oh, excuse me. The height of a plane flying, because you can see the basically quilted patterns of the earth below. And there's an old lady in a rocking chair up in the sky just flying, quilting. And it's part 3, The Crimson King. We are old timers. Each of us holds a locked razor. Robert Lowell, Walking in the Blue. And then the next chapter is chapter 20. Man, oh man. Well, sorry guys for the internet issues, and man, sorry about Spreaker not being live anymore. I know some of you like to listen live, and a lot of you do downloads and stuff, but I mean, it makes things complicated. Just like I was saying last night, I had to try like 3 different times to get it uploaded. Got up this morning, it still wasn't uploaded, so I just exited out of Spreaker, had to go back in, and then pressed upload again. Went and grabbed some lunch and got some gifts for my grandson, and yeah, once I got home, it was uploaded finally. I was thinking of me having to quit doing StreamYard, period. But I hope you guys had an awesome weekend. I'm so glad that you were here to hang out with me. For those of my friends of you out there that have been sick recently, I hope you get to feeling better. I'm glad that one of you that I spoke to last night has kicked pneumonia. I know that stuff can be pretty bad. And there's so many different kinds out there. That can be pretty scary. Not being able to breathe is a big deal. But anyways, thank you guys again so much for hanging out with me tonight on We Are Paradox Media's Late Night in the Rockies. It was a pleasure having you. Thank you to all of our friends on We Are Paradox Media's Facebook, KPNR Radio, Twitter, Spreaker, iHeartRadio, and wherever else you may be listening Beyond the Omniverse tonight. I had a wonderful time, and I can't wait to do it again next weekend. I think we have a double booking. I believe we have Dr. Christopher Macklin on Saturday and a feller named Tony on Sunday. But I gotta double check and work some things out with them and make sure our times are in line and ready to go. But it should be a very, very interesting weekend. Don't forget, you guys, we are all in this together. Together we can make the world a bit better. And together, my friends, we are Paradox Media, because without you, there is no us. Until next time, nighty night, love and light. Have a wonderful rest of your weekend. And I will see you back here, same crazy time, same crazy place. Please take care of my yous. Please don't work too hard. Don't take life too seriously, and enjoy every moment you have with your family, friends, and loved ones, because not any day, minute, or hour is promised. You gotta take advantage of it to the fullest. Night night, live and light. Take care of my yous.